All right, I got some bad news and some good news. The bad news, our buddy Chuck Smith can't be here today. The good news, what a replacement. Big Bob Whitfield in the house. What does he think about the current state of the Falcons? We'll find out next on AJC Falcons News Now.
This is AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. Here are your hosts, Brandon Adams and former Atlanta Falcon Chuck Smith.
Yes, indeed, with Chuck Smith not able to be with us today, what a replacement we have. As the PA announcer used to say inside the Georgia Dome, Big Bob Whitfield. In for Chuck Smith here today. Bob, it is a great pleasure to get a chance to talk with you. Thanks so much for being a part of AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. We appreciate your time and hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well. I understand what the Falcons are going through. I coach some high school football. And, some tough games out there. So just got to stay resilient, stay inspired.
Look, that's good to hear. Look forward to hearing more of your thoughts on that throughout our program. I will explain here real quick. The reason why Chuck is not here today, his son, who's a very good high school football player in the Atlanta area, being honored with an award today from the Touchdown Club of Atlanta. Chuck wanted to be with him, as we all would in that situation. His son doing a great job there for North Gwinnett, a very, very impressive high school football player. So we'll allow Chuck to do that. And I guess before we kind of dive into everything that we're going to do on today's program, I am curious to hear you talk a little bit more about this. You were telling me before our show began, you're coaching high school football now as well. And so Falcons fans, and you'll hear it in our comment section of both Facebook and YouTube throughout the show today, they are not too happy with the current coaching situation of the Falcons organization. But as someone yourself, former player turned coach, the job of a coach is not necessarily an easy one, is it?
Oh, it's a tough job. It's a tough job. Only thing they don't do with high school football is boo. the parents don't boo. But they can show their displeasure with how you're functioning. But from a high school perspective, as being a coach, you just have to stay steadfast. It's just trying to teach them the better side of football, not just the physical aspect, just the execution aspect of the game, and giving them something that they can do and be effective with doing.
So for the Atlanta Falcons here for a moment, before we kind of get into where they are heading towards the Saints and the bye week, I guess just kind of give me a general overview here because, Bob, you played an NFC championship team. You know what it's like to bring a winner to Atlanta and Falcons fans embracing you guys, Chuck, the whole team, back during that era. But also you kind of know the frustrations that can build when you're part of a season like this where Falcons fans really left scratching their heads, wondering, what's the right answer to get this team back playing better again. Just kind of a general overview, if you wouldn't mind giving it to us on what you've seen from these games, what you see from the organization moving forward. Where are the Falcons right now in your mind?
It's kind of what I didn't see. And what I didn't see was that level of dominance from the Falcons. And it's almost like you hang a high standard for that offense to perform. But what you also need is a defense that is very dominant, that can hold people to short gains, small yardages, and can really be tight in the red zone so that powerful offense can get on the field more often. But I think a lot of changeover in coaching staff, a lot of change in just personnel is meaning that the Falcons are still now growing. That offensive line unit is not the same unit that took them to the Super Bowl. That is a new unit, some new draft picks. They are trying to gel. So what I expected from them was high level of execution, but did I expect dominant wins? I said, I have to be real with it. I said they're going to have some growing pains, some lumps along the way.
Keith Basham, by the way, in our Facebook comment section, he's glad to see Bob Whitfield on the show today, as we all are. You mentioned an offensive line. You draft Chris Lindstrom, a guard. He's been hurt. You haven't had a chance to evaluate him, but you've had Caleb McGarry playing as a rookie at the tackle position. Maybe a bit of an uneven year for McGarry, but I think more goods than bads, more positives than negatives. And the experience of that, I think, aged you for 2020. I mean, if I were to say the one thing I think for this Falcons team flashing ahead to next season, because for the most part at this point in time, 2019 is a lost year, new coaching staff I would expect for next year, some new players maybe on defense, but...
Whoa. You just slid that in there. This whole new coaching staff, what is that? You're sliding stuff in there. What is that about?
I think when you listen to people, and the people that we're going to hear from on today's show, these are stakeholders in the Falcons situation. All these people are season ticket holders. Certainly they're sitting in front of their TV each and every Sunday. Bob, the one thing you're going to hear over and over again, and I'm influenced by the voices that we hear from fans each and every week on our program, there's just a level of dissatisfaction where you see the defense not getting better week to week. You see really a lack of answers in terms of how you stop anyone at any given time. I think one of the things you'll experience, Bob, when you hear from our commenters throughout the program today is just an overall level of exasperation where they just don't think that Quinn has any more answers that he can provide, because so much of what we've seen through the first half of the season has been the same old over and over again.
Quinn had a couple things that I said would be wrong, considerably wrong. And maybe one of the things is you can't win football games with mantras. The mantras of the brotherhood and all that. You win football games with high level execution. Enough with the mantras. However, when you look at having to be responsive to the fans, and I'm saying the fans need to be responsive to the players and stay steadfast with the cheers and the yells and get the performance by being a true supporter. And when the Falcons start getting into this fan game and players having to say apologies for their execution to the head coach, then it does show that, hey, may have lost this locker room.
Yeah.
However, Blank is not going to fire anybody mid-year. He learned that debacle when he did Dan Reeves dirty like that. Because it's bad PR. Let the man ride out, and he can still turn the season around. I hope we didn't jump ahead on the list.
No, you
slid some slick stuff in
there. You're doing just fine, Bob.
Slid some stuff in there.
The one thing that we do on AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite, we make sure to bring in ex-players who have points of views and opinions. The same way that Chuck Smith sits here and he'll be back on Friday. The same way that Chuck sits here and he lets it rip. He tells me when I'm wrong. We want to go to former players who bring some expertise, but also bring an opinion and a point of view. And obviously, Bob, that's a big reason why you're sitting here today, because the one thing we know about you, going back to the time that you were wearing number 70 and playing for the Falcons, you're a guy that speaks your mind when there's a microphone in front of you.
Oh, yeah. And it's really what I see is with the Falcons, this sort of debacle. And now, because we like to go into being GM mode and who's getting fired and this and that, and Arthur Blank can be a little testy about everything that's going on with that organization. And this is top to bottom. When you start looking at, is the GM safe? Is the head coach safe?
Right.
Because I said, just fire the defensive coordinator. I was like, oops, it's the head coach. Oh, man, jinx myself. But I like that Dan Quinn kind of knows the writing that's on the wall for himself.
Well, certainly we'll see how he responds to all that. That is Bob Whitfield in for Chuck Smith today. My name is Brandon Adams. It's AJC Falcons News Now. It's sponsored by Miller Lite, the official beer of the Atlanta Falcons. It tastes great, and it's just 96 calories. Now, with all that in mind, strong opinion there from Bob Whitfield. Let's talk about the news and the reporting on this over the course of the last week or so. Mike Garofalo, along with Ian Rappaport, they go on the NFL Network. They said that, actually, let me let you hear Garofalo himself talking about Falcons owner Arthur Blank's plan to stick with Dan Quinn through the bye week. This is Garofalo from the NFL Network. Take a listen to this.
They're not going to fire Dan Quinn here during the bye week after that self-evaluation. He will continue as their coach. I think a lot of people know which way it's going. I mean, they fired all their coordinators last year. You know what usually happens if you don't deliver after that. But I will say this, in talking to a lot of people about this, Arthur Blank has been as supportive as you could possibly be of Dan Quinn during this situation. And I believe that it has to do with the last time that they had a coaching change with Mike Smith. It got a little ugly. You remember that picture of Blank staring him down on the sideline during the London game when they blew the lead there? And then they hired a search firm before they fired Mike Smith. So it was a little bit sloppy. In this case, Arthur Blank, I think he's doing a really good job of keeping this, civil and supportive and saying all the right things.
So it's interesting what you hear from Garofalo there is a little bit similar, Bob, to what you said a moment ago. And you kind of go back to the Dan Reeves era and maybe the bad vibe that the organization got after Reeves was let go. Garofalo there on the NFL Network also referencing the Mike Smith firing, where maybe in terms of the order in which all that goes down, things weren't handled appropriately. You also mentioned Thomas Dimitroff, the GM, a minute ago there as well. I can tell you for a lot of Falcons fans, when Smith was let go and Dimitroff sat there on the podium basically like looking down on Smith as the one that was the scapegoat for all the problems, there is a degree to which maybe some of this kind of stuff in the past in terms of coaching firings, maybe they haven't been handled as cleanly and neatly as that they could have been. Do you think that's really what's at stake here for Atlanta, for Blank in particular? Pretty forceful in his defense of Quinn last week. At least to a certain extent, do you think this is because of some of the messy situations of the past?
Oh, yeah, it's dirty business, this football. And because they got things like the Black Monday comes around like the plague, in this dirty business of football, you have to look at what's the good PR move, what's the bad PR move. One thing Dan Quinn did was give Arthur Blank his Super Bowl. The Falcons that I played under, Arthur Blank was not the owner.
Yeah.
So when he had Dan Quinn, he inherited that team.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't build it his way from scratch. So Arthur Blank now has Quinn as his guy. That's his go-to guy. Dan Quinn is Arthur's go-to guy. And he wanted to protect him because he did deliver at one point in time. So he doesn't want to embarrass him, I would say, or cast a dirty picture on the relationship.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, because I think that's a really interesting opinion. You also kind of jokingly said a moment ago of, in some situations, a coach like this, you'd say, well, you'll keep the head coach, but you just fire the defensive coordinator, because that's been obviously the worst unit. But in this case, that's obviously a tough situation because Quinn's also the defensive coordinator. So let's say against New Orleans on Sunday, the phrasing that kind of hangs in my head here is what Blank said a couple of weeks ago of, we're going to take a couple of weeks and evaluate this. We're going to take a couple of weeks and think about this, basically giving them a free pass through the bye week. It's not even almost necessary for Garofalo to say what he said there, or Ian Rappaport either, just given the fact that we kind of already knew that for the most part Quinn was going to be safe throughout the bye, certainly to go through the trade deadline if nothing else. But what if the defense doesn't look better against New Orleans? As an offense that can make you look bad, what if it is another loss? At that point in time, will you still remain confident that Blank's going to give Quinn throughout the rest of the season? That sounds like something you're pretty confident in.
I'm very confident in that. And one of the things I'm confident in is that whole old phrase, the eye in the sky don't lie.
Yeah.
And when you start breaking down individual performances. And so when you start evaluating a head coach getting fired, you also have to evaluate individual performances. Individual performances from certain players, when they're on the hot seat every year, Vic Beasley's are on the hot seat, hey, look at his performance. Those things get evaluated, like, are his players executing with what they're given? So when they have lack of execution, then it might go down to, oh, you got the wrong players on the team. You're filling the coach's roster with players that can't perform.
Would you mind if we took a few comments here for a
let's go.
moment? Shira Floyd, going back to your issue, says Dan Quinn needs to do one or the other, not both. Now, we see some guys around the league who can successfully pull off being a defensive coordinator and head coach, but for Dan Quinn, Chuck has said, Chuck Smith, our normal co-host here on Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite, that it's too much of a responsibility for Quinn to be both defensive coordinator and head coach. Shira seems to feel the same way. Would you agree with that?
I said they should have revolutionized pro football.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have let Shanahan go. They should have had two head coaches, co-head coaches, one offense, one defense. That would have revolutionized everything so Dan Quinn can focus here, your offensive guy can focus here. I just don't believe that the offensive staff that they have, probably it doesn't show on the sidelines, and in what I see between them, that they have this little Dan's head coach and he trusts his offensive coordinator.
Right.
I just don't see the love.
Yeah.
And I don't see the love between Matt Ryan with the offense that he's running. I don't see the spark. He was better then.
Certainly not the same comfort level now that you have with Kyle Shanahan. And I'll tell you, Bob, to hear the way that Falcons fans respond to seeing San Francisco still undefeated, Kyle Shanahan offensively doing some of the same things with the 49ers that he did here in Atlanta, and frankly, he's probably doing it in San Francisco with a less talented roster overall than one they had here. You had franchise quarterback in Matt Ryan. You had, all-pro Julio Jones. Those kinds of guys in San Francisco, for the most part, were non-existent.
Right.
Garoppolo was a backup quarterback. Tevin Coleman, kind of a cast-off from the Falcons. And to see the success they're having there, a lot of people say the same thing of, my gosh, you let the wrong coach get it away after the Super Bowl season. Hard to keep a guy from, going to be a head coach there, but it's hard not to look back on what Shanahan was, what he has been since he's left, and the way in which the Falcons offense, at least statistically speaking, has kind of sputtered since then.
Yeah, it's sputtered, and it's funny looking, the offense, when you don't have your go-to guys, like the Julio guys getting the go-to matchup. Your go-to guy now is the tight end, and I like him because he's a Stanford man.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But it's not the same Falcon team, and not being the same Falcon team that you learned and what you saw them do. They do a lot of different things now with that offense. So it's almost like the blame and onus always goes to Matt Ryan because he's the leader on that squad. But then from the individual capacity, I always blame the offensive line.
Because you understand that position.
They will save a quarterback's job faster than he can keep it. So the offensive line, to me, has been probably a little bit of the issue over the last few seasons. They just have not been dominant as you would like for them to have a Super Bowl caliber team.
Dwayne Coleman in our Facebook comment section does bring up Matt Ryan. And, Bob, you understand that for a franchise quarterback, they're going to get as much attention as the coach is going to get. They're going to get as much attention as the GM is going to get. And when the season's not good, Ryan's not going to be impervious to that criticism. Now, I am personally of the belief that the nucleus of this organization moving forward, no matter what the coaching staff looks like in 2020 and beyond, that Ryan, Julio Jones are still the focal point of this team, and you hope you can build an offensive line in front of those guys. But the focal point of this team is Ryan throwing to receivers. I'd also add Calvin Ridley and hopefully Austin Hooper, assuming they re-sign him. I would add that as the nucleus of this Falcons organization. But what's your take on Ryan as a guy that blocked for some good quarterbacks and maybe some over the course of your career, and not always great quarterbacks? What would you say about the current state of Matt Ryan moving into final years of his prime, but certainly still a few more of those kinds of years left?
I said he's bolstered by the talent around him because he's a great quarterback, in my opinion, a great stand-up quarterback. He didn't miss a game for like 10 seasons?
Right.
And he took a lot of shots. So I don't take him as the guy that's just going to take the knee or take the sack. I take him as a pure competitor, fierce, valiant in his efforts. But I also take that he needs a caliber of guys that sustain him. And your running back position helps open up his play action. His play action is great. And when you got a tight end that stretches the field alongside good receivers, and Julio is not the Julio of old. The Julio of old could run the little zigzag routes and this and that. Julio has foot injuries from time to time that now his best route is a long 15-yard dig route. And those routes take more time in the passing game, where now your offensive lineman got to hold up on the 7-step drop and probably some play action, little doohickey to the running back to bite that linebacker up and open up that deep end for Julio. And if your line is getting beat on upfield rushes and getting dudes swiping at you, it's hard to deliver what is basically your advantage.
Well, it's one of the things I've talked about too, and obviously I don't know this as a former player, but when you watch what's kind of proliferating through the NFL right now, you see these quick hit offenses. But I think it was more of a college style of play where it's a quick snap, it's a quick release, and you don't put as much pressure on your offensive line because you're trying to release the football before the pass rush gets a chance to get there. I think one thing that Atlanta, no matter who's going to be ultimately making the decisions, I believe one of the things that Atlanta ought to be doing in the future, because you have good receivers and because you have a smart, quality quarterback, modernize this offense more by giving it a chance to have some of the quick hitter stuff that I think Arizona's used to great success. LA's used to great success. I think New England, from time to time does a version of this. Peyton can do this well at New Orleans. Smart offenses seem to use a little bit of a quick trigger, quick release. I'd love to see more of that in Atlanta.
Everybody would want it. Everybody would want it. I say, no, I like what they do. I mean, I'm from the old school Dan Reeves offense where you put a lot of pressure on your offensive line. But that's why you draft first-round offensive linemen. It's for that level of pressure. It's that level of pressure on the first-round offensive lineman that's what brings him the big bucks. Their left tackle, to me, is the second best person on the Falcons to ever wear that 70. Me being the first.
There you go, big body number one.
But he can play. That guy can tussle. So he can hold down the fort at left tackle so that your right tackle is learning. He had Dante Fowler a couple weeks ago, so he learned about a speed rush to a power rush to an inside spin. He learned that, but he was inexperienced, but he's grooming more. So they've been having trouble at guards. Guards have been their issue the past few years, and the guards haven't been as stout as I would like to see them. So the Falcons, to me, their nucleus on offense is going to be with the offensive line. And you try to protect your offensive line with that short passing, but that stuff is for the birds when you got guys that are willing to tussle.
Well, that's good to know. J.J. Green, by the way, echoing your same point about the guards they're bringing in, including Lindstrom, who's been hurt this year, not a chance to play, means not a chance to develop the way that you might. Tony Fleming also brings this up, the number of Saints fans we could see in Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Sunday. And, Bob, you kind of understand this, twofold, that Falcons-Saints always been a great rivalry. And for a lot of Falcons fans, this is one of those on Sunday where you feel like you kind of go into the game, your team maybe doesn't have a great chance to win, and you're going to be hearing of a bunch of Saints fans. I mean, you of all people, because of the number of games like this you played in this rivalry, and you guys kind of go back to the old NFC West days when it was before the NFC South. You were playing the Saints as an NFC West showdown, but you understand that Falcons-Saints rivalry, and for a lot of Falcons fans, this is one on Sunday they're not necessarily looking forward to, because Saints fans have a tendency to do this when their team's the one that's winning. And right now in New Orleans, unfortunately, is one of the classes of the NFC.
Oh, yeah, and what you have in that rivalry is a lot of chatter, a lot of noise, a lot of really tenacious football. And you have two fan bases that for this game, Falcons fans show up in big droves and forces for this game, because this is a regional, what we call those true regional rivalries. And because of now there's a lot of Saints fans living in Atlanta, and it's almost like the extras is going to be there, because now it's neighbors and neighbors rivalry. So it's like, it's the best thing, because both teams always compete well in this game.
Yeah.
They always do. I think they both elevate their level of playing this game.
So let me get a couple YouTube comments here. Then I want to talk about a pretty interesting piece was in the AJC recently. The outlet on YouTube talking about Grady Jarrett, and on a defensive year that for the most part has been a huge disappointment, and you really are left to question the performance of a lot of guys who are supposed to be answers to that Falcons defense. As a former player, what does it mean to you when you see Grady Jarrett as a defensive lineman show up every Sunday, playing this game, I believe, at a Pro Bowl level? Win or lose, regardless of record, regardless of what the team itself is playing for, Jarrett does his job as a pro. As a former player, what does it mean to you when a guy like that buckles his chin strap every Sunday and goes out there and plays with a level of pride the way that Jarrett has this season?
You wish that you can clone him, or instill his energy into all the other players. And what you have with Grady Jarrett is he is the inspirational, force in that bunch. But his inspirational force cannot extend that far into other players. Other players have to derive it from him, but they have to demand it within themselves. And what happens is the brain gets a little cloudy and foggy when you start losing games and when you start having to answer questions about your performance, where it becomes obvious that you cannot play well. And you have to show back up and say, on this game here, I'm going to play better. I'm going to play. I don't need to prove it to a fan. I'm going to prove it to myself first. With confidence, I understand what I need to do, how I need to execute. And that's what the Falcons, to me, it's not a team effort right now that is needed. It's a bunch of individual, unique efforts that every man does what he's supposed to do.
Trey Dukes in our YouTube comment section also bringing up the lack of pass rush. And we hear Chuck talk about this a lot from the standpoint of, as a guy who's teaching pass rushers now and a guy who was a very good pass rusher when he played in the game, what he thinks is missing from Atlanta. You're a different kind of person on this, because your job for the entirety of your career was to block would-be pass rushers. So when you see Atlanta, which went a long time without getting a sack, and for the most part it really hasn't been disruptive in the backfield all season long, as a guy that used to try to stop pass rushers, what do you think is missing from this group right now?
Well, they got a one-man show going on. It is Grady Jarrett. And Grady Jarrett can only match up so many different times where he's not going to be affected by a double-team combination. So whether we leave a running back in there to chip up on him, or we slide a lineman to have a double-team block on Grady Jarrett, it leaves individual matchups on your defensive ends. Right tackle on Vic Beasley, and you can tussle. Vic Beasley hasn't shown me enough variety in his pass rush that he's going to give you a good speed rush, but that's about it. Tack McKinley, I like his play. I like his aggressiveness, but he does not get away from the aggressiveness enough to make a lot of plays, because he can run into some big tackles that can handle his bull rush that he's now stuck on the block. So Grady Jarrett becomes your spark plug, but the spark plug cannot make every play, so he can only force so much to the other guys, like, you got to win at the top of the rush to make a sack.
One more of these on YouTube before we kind of move on and talk about something different. James Reed Jr. also bringing up the challenges of facing the Saints Saints offense, which Atlanta will have to do on Sunday. When you look at Sean Payton, I said this to Chuck Smith the other day, that start comparing some of the offensive pieces. You know, Matt Ryan, franchise quarterback. Drew Brees, franchise quarterback. You know, Michael Thomas looks like he might be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Julio Jones has been that for a number of years. You know, why does it appear that some of those guys are having more success than Atlanta right now? I think you point to the continuity that comes from having an offensive-minded coach that has been as successful as Sean Payton has been. Falcons fans don't like giving the Saints credit for anything, and I certainly understand that. But the one place I think you do have to say, you know what, this is as advertised every year for that team, is what Sean Payton does to the offense. By the way, that's been true this year with Alvin Kamara battling injury for a good portion of the year. Didn't play, you know, 2 Sundays ago. You know, this is an offense that has just kind of found a way under Payton, and I think even the most Saints-hating Falcon fan has to begrudgingly respect that.
Yeah, they're going to respect it because they're going to get heavy doses of it.
Yeah.
When you see those receivers again and all those guys, you get heavy doses of that type of action, crossing routes, little pick delays, and then you have enough in the backfield even without Kamara. When you bring in your quarterback slash wildcat running Hill,
Yeah.
you have a coach that knows how to use his strengths, use his formations, use his talent, and put them in proper places so that they can be effectively winning on the field. And it's the perfect cohesion with quarterbacks and the coach and the assignment and just everything they do is that they're an effective team.
Right.
I mean, they're a very effective team. They have stuff that really can take guys that you would say, oh, what they call the beer man, they brought him off the street and install him in an offense that makes him a superstar.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is Big Bob Whitfield in today for Chuck Smith. My name is Brandon Adams. This is AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. Good to have you with us. By the way, Chuck can't be with us today. He's attending a luncheon for his son, who's being awarded. His son's a very good high school football player in the Atlanta area.
By the same name.
That's right, by the same name. That's right. Another Chuck Smith out there chasing down quarterbacks. Nothing can be more appropriate than that. Chuck will be back with us here on Friday on AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. Also, a remind you is that to get the most in-depth Falcons coverage throughout the week, of course, the AJC, a great way to do that. And the best way to get the most Falcons coverage from the AJC is to become an AJC subscriber. So when you do, as a special thank you, this Falcons branded cooler, of course, the AJC, a proud partner of the Atlanta Falcons, subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now. The website again, subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now. That's how you become an AJC subscriber. You'll get this cooler as a special thank you. Lots of different choices. You can get the e-paper delivered right to your device every day. That's your phone, your laptop, whatever else. You can get Sunday home delivery, 7-day home delivery along with the e-paper. Of course, all of these are canceled anytime. But when you become an AJC subscriber, as a special thank you, you get the Falcons branded cooler. But you got to use the website, subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now. Now, speaking of the AJC, our buddy D. Orlando Ledbetter from the AJC had a really interesting piece the other day with Brian Baldinger, an NFL Network analyst, a guy that does some really good Twitter breakdowns of various NFL games, and looked kind of critically at the Falcons a couple of weeks ago. So D-Led brought him onto the AJC, interviewed him, and I want to show you this particular comment from Brian Baldinger to D-Led. The Falcons' most disappointing team in the league from Baldinger's perspective. And Bob, one of the things that Baldy's done on Twitter is kind of highlight some of the defensive breakdowns, whether it be gaping holes along the defensive line of scrimmage, or the Seattle game in particular, where lack of communication down near the red zone and receivers are just running free wide open. Obviously, it's tough to defend Russell Wilson if you've got a great game plan, but if you've got breakdowns, that's not going to work at all. From your perspective, what are you seeing from the defense? I thought you said this so well a little earlier, that the mantras don't really work after a while. The brotherhood, the T-shirts, things like that. It comes down to a certain point about technique on the field. But Baldy calls it the most disappointing team in the league, citing the defense in particular. What have you seen from this defense? Just kind of go along with that.
Well, the defense has made mistakes. I've seen that, but what I also seen is just a lack of responsibility and a lack of just cohesion, where the mistakes are made and then it just doesn't seem that the guys are being responsible, where they keep repeatedly making mistakes. And it's certain things that I say you can get beat out on that field, that you just get beat. The man physically beats you or something like that. However, but if you beat yourself out there, when you taking bad angles, or if you're not understanding assignment, alignment correct, and then if you're just not making plays. The other side of it is now you have to just make some plays. It's like, I get an opportunity to make some plays. I got to make some plays for the team. And the defense Keanu Neal left, and it's just like he was to me, the enforcer out there. And when the enforcer's gone, you leave everything to the middle linebacker to cover corners, some new corners in the secondary. Mm-hmm. The defense stinks.
Yeah, right now it does.
Come on, it stinks.
And with that in mind, we actually have a little bit of breaking news here. So let's make sure we let people know about this. D. Orlando Ledbetter reporting at AJC.com right now. The Falcons have made some coaching shufflings. I'm going to go through some of this. The biggest news, though, is that former Bucs head coach and a guy that spent a lot of his time on the defense side of the ball, Raheem Morris, who has been Falcons wide receivers coach, is moving back to the defense. Let me read you guys just a little bit of this, couple sentences from D-Led at AJC.com. So 3 coaching changes made by the Falcons here. Raheem Morris, wide receivers coach, going to switch back to the defensive side. He's going to be the new secondary coach. Dave Brock, who's been the running backs coach, moved back to his old position. He'll be wide receivers coach. And Bernie Parmalee, longtime NFL running back, who was an offensive assistant and assistant special teams coach, was moved back to his old position as running backs coach. The big news here, all those moves being made to move Raheem Morris to the defensive side of the ball. There had been some speculation, had Quinn been fired last week, that Raheem Morris, had he not become interim head coach, might have become interim defensive coordinator in that sense, because he does have a history on defense. But for now, with Quinn remaining, he is going to move Raheem Morris to the defensive side. He's going to become your defensive backs coach, but have some influence now on this defense, which will continue to be led by some Quinn at the helm here. But with Raheem Morris now influential on defense. And Bob, we're reacting to this as it happened, but my initial opinion is, when you are 1-7, when your back is against the wall, and you've got a division rival coming in, now you've still got 6 games against your division here to come. So from a Falcons standpoint, they want to play as well as they can in those games. I got no problem with this. I got no problem saying, hey, let's just try something. Raheem Morris is over here. Let's at least try that. Is it too little, too late? Maybe it ends up being that way. But in terms of trying something, I got no problem with you throwing anything you can against the wall.
Sounds like you got a problem with it.
No. See if something sticks. See if it works. I got no problem trying this for the game on Sunday. See if Raheem Morris can have some influence on that defense.
Well, I know what it says also is that you needed a coach that can get the response from the players. And that's what it says here, is you need a coach that can get the response from the players. And if the secondary is needed this week to contain that New Orleans offense, you need a coach that can get those guys playing.
Yeah.
And he is that dude. He is that guy that can get those guys performing with a certain level. And does it say maybe they weren't responding to Quinn too well?
Right.
Maybe the voice of Quinn is heard too much in their heads. Like they hear him on the newscast, they hear him on in the building, they hear him in all the commercials. And it's almost like his voice is not getting the response that you need.
Right.
Put a new voice in front of him that can get that response.
And along those lines, Alan Eady, I told you, this is Alan L. Eady Sr. in our Facebook comment section. He says, the only coaching change we need is the head coach. So that's what Alan says in response to Raheem Morris.
He said it, I didn't.
Moving to the defense side of the ball. So that gives you an idea of the way some of the Falcons fans feel. However, Victor Rashawn Phillips, though, says, I like this. At least for right now, it's a chance to, because people know, Raheem Morris. A lot of fans know him. He was head coach in Tampa. He's had an influence on defense there for a while. So he's probably, I would say, among the more popular members of this Falcons coaching staff right now. He's one of the guys that does have that head coaching experience. So I think for the most part, at least in the short term, heading into Sunday, this will be treated as a positive piece of news, because it's the kind of fans always favor doing something, right? Do something to show that you're trying to rearrange things. Do something to show that you're trying to fix things. And at least this looks like doing something.
It's definitely doing something. I wouldn't call it just throwing anything against the wall to see if it sticks.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying it should have already probably been stuck. Meaning that this probably should have been from day one that Raheem Morris was in charge of the defense. He should have been defensive coordinator probably from day one.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that I think it's kudos to Dan Quinn to realize that, these kids are not responding to me right now. They're not playing their best for me right now. Let me make a move to get them to play better. And Raheem Morris can get them to play better.
Well, along those lines, Leon Hutchinson in our Facebook comment section says, nobody respects Quinn as a coach. He's too much of a friend trying to tell you what to do. So, Leon, I understand the point that you're coming from here, and you see more from D-Led on Twitter right there. You can check out more of the story at AJC.com and throughout the day at Flowery Branch AJC.com on more of that from D. Orlando Ledbetter. Good stuff to get that there on the screen. But as far as Leon's point goes about a lack of respect for Quinn, they may not be responding to him on the field. But, Bob, the one thing that you hear from Falcons players week after week after week is they like Quinn. They want to play for him. Vic Beasley, who's probably the target of more Falcons fan criticism than anybody, he said a couple weeks ago they feel like they're letting Quinn down. Maybe Beasley feels that way more than anybody else because he was the one that Quinn really vouched for in the offseason, brought him back on a one-year show-me contract. I think these guys want to play for Quinn. You start to wonder if they're just not set up for success to do that, and that's why a new voice like Raheem Morris, apparently going to be for the game on Sunday, might be valuable. But the one thing I don't believe there's a lack of respect for Quinn. I think the players like him. I think they respect him. I just think they're having a hard time achieving anything for him.
Yeah, we love June Jones.
That's right.
But June Jones got the axe, and it's one of those things because victories really show how much you love them.
Yeah.
And what you have with Quinn's situations is I think he is a good players coach. I think he does create a good aura, a good feeling about what you do in that locker room. However, when it comes to winning and losing games, are the teams going to win for you or are they going to blame you? And this Falcons team, because of the hoopla around the quarterback, the players have been off the hook.
Yeah.
They've been off the hook. The pressure's on him now.
Yeah.
He's shielded them. He's been like a cape coming from Superman, and now you guys are bulletproof. You don't have to take the heat. And the players are seeing that, so now they're pointing at themselves and, hey, I let coach down.
Yeah.
Nah, man, just go get some sacks, bro. We don't need to worry about you. The coach has shielded you. Just go get some sacks. He's shielded you. So Dan Quinn knows he can take this show on the road. He's a good defensive coach. He can take this show on the road.
So if you're just joining us, let me kind of reset the news here for right now. As we're broadcasting the show live, D. Orlando Ledbetter on Twitter letting this be known. You can also click in the story there, read more about this at AJC.com. Falcons have made 3 coaching moves, but the other 2 really a requirement because of the big one. Raheem Morris, defensive-minded guy who had been wide receivers coach, is switching over to the defensive side of the ball, and he'll be the new secondary coach. Now, keep in mind that previous reporting from D-Led had led us to believe that Quinn had been slowly relinquishing some game plan. I shouldn't say, maybe play calling is a better way to say that. Play calling responsibilities in game. Some of that kind of stuff had been taken off Quinn's plate a little bit the last couple of weeks. Quinn didn't want to be too specific about, kind of where that responsibility had been shifted. But this news that Raheem Morris going to the defensive side of the ball comes at the same time. There had been some reports about maybe some of the responsibility is lessened for Quinn and kind of some of that moved over to the defensive staff. So unclear to me right now how much additional responsibility that Morris will take on moving to the defensive side, but he's no longer wide receivers coach. He's now the secondary coach. Dave Brock is now the wide receivers coach, and a longtime NFL running back, Bernie Parmalee, who's been working with the Falcons special teams. He will now be a running backs coach. So Raheem Morris here going to the defensive side of the ball. We'll continue to kind of monitor this from D-Led on Twitter and everything else that kind of goes along with Flowery Branch, not just today, but the next few days there as well.
Yeah.
So Jeff Desir on YouTube, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, also weighing on some more defensive issues, mentioning Ricardo Allen, that he bulked up this year. I feel the move to strong safety put Kazee back to free safety where he excelled last year. And so this is a lot of what's going on. Jeff is a good example of this in our YouTube comment section, that you're trying to figure out, and maybe that's what the Raheem Morris move will allow you to do. From this defense, who's a keeper, who's someone you want to build around, and who's someone that you want to move on from. And one thing we know is Falcons are up against the salary cap. In the NFL, that's the one thing you cannot fudge that. Yeah. You blur that. Salary cap is what it is. Some guys on this team now cannot come back next year. There's some guys in the defense the Falcons probably don't want to bring back next year. But what Jeff is doing here on YouTube, Bob, is what a lot of Falcons fans are doing, and saying, okay, from this defensive group, who do we really want to keep around? Who really is a building block for the future? And by giving Morris a chance to work with some of these guys, especially in the secondary, that may give you a chance to learn a little bit more about them. Does Desmond Trufant have a future in Atlanta? You mentioned, other guys. These guys have a future in Atlanta. Well, giving Morris a chance to work with them may help you know the answer to that question more.
It would definitely give you the answer, but what it also will tell you in that answer is what should they've been doing?
Right.
Meaning that Dan Quinn has a very complex defense when you look at all the things he's capable of doing. If you respond to remember what Seattle's defense did under that similar system. So with Dan Quinn, they've been playing on multiple fronts. They've been playing 3-4, 4-3 fronts, different changes of nickel and dime packages, whatever. So now you have guys playing multiple identities. And back in the day, Raheem Morris comes from Tampa. And they had one defense in particular they ran was Tampa too. They didn't name the defense after Tampa.
They named the whole thing after them, that's right.
And it's one of those things that they ran that a lot.
Yeah.
And let guys get wise in that front. So this might be one of those moves where the defensive backfield now can settle in and run a simplified package that may fit their aggressive natures and may help in their coverage skills, that may help like, hey, these packages are for you to perform better. So that there's that thing we talked about earlier about just the expectations of what your players can do.
Right.
And really learning that, hey, they can't do what I expect them to do.
Right, yeah.
Let me find something that they can do.
By the way, Denethian Henderson on Facebook says they should have let Raheem Morris take over the whole defense. So that gives you an idea how some Falcons fans feel about this right now. Let you hear from Dan Quinn here for a moment, because obviously Quinn's in a tough spot. One way or another, a lot of debate going on around him. He certainly hears that, but he's got a job to do to be focused and prepared for the opponent coming up on Sunday. We're going to hear from him about that in a moment. First, let me remind you, though, that Big Bob Whitfield, lucky to have him in today in place of Chuck Smith, who will be back with us on Friday. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite, the official beer of the Atlanta Falcons. It tastes great, and it's just 96 calories. Let me start with this from Quinn, the whole idea of the noise that's out there, everything else. For them, they got to think one Sunday at a time, which I know sounds like a cliche, but never more important for Atlanta than it is right now. Here's what Quinn said about that last week, getting ready for what's going to go down this week with the New Orleans Saints. Here's Dan Quinn.
For us, not at all the way we envisioned our bye week, sitting at 1-7, and not the first half that any of us envisioned either. But we do have an opportunity to turn that around. And for the second half, I'd like us to focus on what we need to do right. And I'd like us coming out of the bye week, much like we came out in the second half last night. I thought that showed complementary football. It showed offensive scores, showed defensive stops, making kicks, having opportunities to play like we're capable of playing. So that complementary ball had been a missing part of what we were doing. I thought there were stretches where one side might have played well or the other didn't, or a third phase. So for us, it's not just a bye week or just a week off, but a purposeful week. And we'll jump right into our division when we get back. And really the only thing for us is about one opponent and one matchup. And that's 100% where our focus will be.
So obviously Quinn's saying what he needs to say right there. And Bob, when I say things like what I'm about to say, Chuck sometimes says that, former players don't like to hear this, but from the standpoint of the fans, the Falcons will be well served by not winning a game the rest of the season, right? I mean, I know you don't like that either. You're a competitor. You want to play hard. But from a fan standpoint, it'd be great if the Falcons lost every game the rest of the year, because you get a great draft pick, you get a chance to bring in a game-changing pass rusher. But the one thing I'm willing to acknowledge, and I knew you weren't going to like it. That's why I gave you a warning before I said it. Look at the look on his face. I knew you weren't going to like that.
It's like eating a pie full of lemons.
But the one thing I will acknowledge, though, is if you're Dan Quinn, or if you're one of these players who may be on kind of the brink of coming back to this team next year or not, you have every right to try to play in such a way to save your job. I totally get that. And in so many words, what you hear from Dan Quinn there is, I'm going to coach as a way of trying to keep my job. Players, we're going to play in such a way to maintain our pride and maintain our paycheck, maybe more so important than that. Even though there's a larger truth that I believe that's just undeniable, that being 1-15 would have huge value for Atlanta going forward. I don't fault Quinn for not seeing it that way. I don't fault the guys on the field for not seeing that way. And as a former player, I know how strongly you feel about a chance to go out and earn the name on the back of your jersey every single Sunday.
Since we're talking this vast conspiracy theory of players and organizations just lose games, put people in bad situations,
Right.
How about this one then? Go get Lincoln Riley from OU. Go get Tua. Go get Jalen Hurts in the draft. And then you go put Oklahoma so that you can have this nice, high-paced, fast-looking, herky-jerky offense with the premier college teams. And they've seen it with Michael Vick. They know what jersey sale does for a franchise. Mm-hmm. They know what exposure does for a franchise, so that Arthur Blank can go get the most sought-after mind in quarterbacks at OU, go get the number one quarterback that's coming from Alabama, and then bring in Jalen Hurts for good measure. Stack the thing, have 2-quarterback system, and be all fanfare, short passes galore. Heck no.
Eric Munn says amen. Eric Munn says amen. He said, now somebody's over here speaking the truth. So Eric Munn likes that. Here's what I've said. If they hired Lincoln Riley, because that's what I think would be a very good idea. If they hired Lincoln Riley, if they went 1-15 and got into position to draft Chase Young, the pass rusher out of Ohio State, that may be the best player in the entire country right now, all due respect to the other quarterbacks. He may be the best player in the whole sport at the college level. You draft Young, you hire an offensive-minded coach like Lincoln Riley. With the talent that will be on this team next year, I believe they can go 11-5. But you got to have a game record to pass rush. You got to have an offensive-minded head coach. You got to do those two things. You do those two things. I think 11-5 for the Falcons in 2020 is a very real possibility. And you'll be selling all kinds of jerseys. You'll be selling all kinds of tickets. You'll be making all kinds of money. You'll be stacking it. You know what it's like. You run a 14-2 team. You know what it feels.
Yeah.
It feels pretty good to be a Falcon during a good season.
I was also in an 0-8 team. I know it feels pretty bad too. I know bad too. Not just good. No bad.
You bring an offensive-minded coach to the city. You bring a game-wrecking pass rusher. I'm not ready to give up on Takk McKinley yet from Atlanta, but Vic Beasley, you bring that situation in here, you're talking about a team that can win 11 games next year.
With Matt Ryan?
With Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan thrown to Julio. Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, expanded role.
Well, since you like a lot of fan conjecture, you know the fan conjecture on Matt Ryan is he's the problem now.
I do know that.
So now you're going to bet with Lincoln Riley and Matt Ryan?
Mm-hmm. See, people think that if you're Lincoln Riley, you have to have a college-style quarterback, what Kyler Murray is for the Cardinals anyway. I don't believe that's true. I mean, first of all, look at the Cardinals here. Look at the way that Cliff Kingsbury has evolved his offense since he's taken over that team. Go back and watch week 1. It's 4 receivers on every single play. Very little tight end use. Watch them a little bit more recently, though. You're starting seeing 1 and 2 tight end sets of them a little bit more, 12 personnel type stuff, the way that a lot of NFL teams run on the regular. These college guys have I'm talking about the coaches now. These college coaches have the capability of adapting. And what we think of as more of an NFL-style quarterback, which Ryan is, especially kind of an old-school NFL-style quarterback, I think someone like Lincoln Riley would enjoy the opportunity not to have to develop a quarterback for a change. Because in college, you're developing one every single year. Kyler Murray was a baseball player before Lincoln Riley got his hands on him. Jalen Hurts was a backup before Lincoln Riley got his hands on him. Baker Mayfield had been a walk-on. It's hard work developing a guy every single year. Matt Ryan is a finished product. Go enjoy him for 3 or 4 years, and then if you still want to coach at the NFL level, then pick your own quarterback after that. But I wouldn't discount the ways in which someone like Lincoln Riley might say, finally I get to relax and work with a guy that knows playbooks.
See, my beard is growing long with all these little theories.
Right.
Using my little wisdom beard.
I like that. Rub that. Yeah. Give you a lot to think about.
But the fans won't like that. Well, they want a trifecta, the way I've been hearing.
You
they want
that.
Head coach,
you hear that.
Quarterback, and GM gone.
Right, you hear that.
And they would like, bring in this guy here, some that's young and high-flying, and give him the reins. Let him have it.
Right.
Let him be the protege of the greatness that the Falcons want to see.
Well, no, to push back on this a little bit, Victor Vershawn Phillips on Facebook says, please tell me what's the problem with Matt Ryan, other than the fact he doesn't run very well.
I like Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
I feel like just because he stands up all the time, he takes a lot of hits and gets back up. So when someone fell on his ankle, I was like, dang, they actually hurt Superman. He's been that guy for the Falcons. And I say he's still got game in him. He can still deliver. He still knows the offensive very well. Yeah. He knows defenses. Some people say he doesn't read defenses as effectively as other quarterbacks. Sure. But I said a lot of things that he does know about his reads of defense is based on certain timing things. And he can throw stuff on time. So when you have a quarterback that just has a good wherewithal of most offenses and most defenses he's going to face, you will have success. So I'm not against him and Lincoln Riley if that ever was to happen.
Sure,
I'm not saying it's happened.
Sure.
But maybe since Arthur Blank is my friend and he listens sometime, maybe.
Sure, he's probably tuning in right now.
Right now.
Now I'm going to make you mad about something else in a second. I'm going to go ahead and warn you. I'm going to just a couple minutes. Just be ready for it. I'm going to make you mad about something else in a second. So we'll let you tell me why I'm wrong here in a minute. Before that, though, one more quick one on Dan Quinn. Obviously, he knows what happened in the Falcons' final game. Unusual circumstances. Arthur Blank steps up, speaks to the media, somewhat defending Dan Quinn, although still muddying the waters about what the future for Quinn in Atlanta is. From the Falcons coach's perspective, he just wishes that entire conversation wasn't needing to take place. Here is Dan Quinn on that.
Yeah, I feel horrible that he even has to have, a press conference or a makeshift press conference to do that, because we just want to get it right. We want to get it right for him. We want to get it right for the fans. And the good thing about having a good relationship with him is everything that was said publicly has already been discussed, certainly privately. And so, but he's at the top of the list of people that you want to do it right for because of the kind of support that he gives. So, certainly feel, terrible that we even had to have a makeshift press conference based on our team and our performance.
So you mentioned the fact that, over the course of your career, you had some ups and downs when it comes to coaches. You obviously kind of rode through all this in the Dan Reeves era here in Atlanta. What is it like for a player when you kind of go into a game not knowing, the Seattle game, a lot of people thought that could have been Quinn's last game because the bye week was looming. I'm guessing maybe some players themselves at least consider that as a possibility, although I don't have any firsthand knowledge on that. But when you have the owner of the team speaking up about the situation, I mean, what is it like for the players in that situation?
Well, it does take a little heat and disperses it all around. So now it's not just the coach going to feel the heat, the player's going to feel the heat. Jobs are going to be on the line here. Jobs for everybody. Even the cafeteria lady, she burned the eggs. Jobs are on the line. When the owner has to speak about his football team, jobs are on the line. And the coaching staff now get to highly evaluate their performances on the field. And what they can say about those performances, like, you may not be with this team next year because you don't perform to caliber. And it's not just about Quinn, to me, when your team is 1-8. I always put the head coach and all that aside.
Yeah.
It's about the players. And because you have the owner stepping in and the head coach taking heat, it should always go back to the players. They're the ones that got to perform what's asked of them. And one of the things is, now if the head coach is calling some horrible plays, now the players are the ones that sort that out with the head coach. They're the ones that go back and say, head coach, these are horrible plays.
Well, can I ask you a question about that then to kind of further the conversation? When there's so much accountability going towards the coach, or at least potential accountability, does that run the risk of not putting enough accountability on the part of the players? Because I think one of the things I think some people think they have seen, we've heard this in media reports, we've heard fan conjecture about this, is the idea that there's a lack of accountability around the Falcons organization and bad play has been tolerated because there's so much consternation one way or another about the future of Dan Quinn. So does the extra accountability that Quinn has gotten through all of this, is that taking too much pressure off the part of the players to go out there and earn their own jobs every Sunday?
Well, everybody's deflecting.
Yeah.
Everybody's shielding themselves. And one of the things that you can see happen in football is when those shields come up, when players are shielding themselves from the critique or criticism about their performance, is then they don't show up at all. Yeah. So they do enough to, hey, the play didn't go my way. I was on my man, but then I didn't make the play. Hey, they ran away from me. So, yeah, the little extras, what my one coach Gans used to call lanyap.
Yeah.
Little extras of what you're supposed to do as a player gets lost when all the heat is on the head coach, because now he's the one having to deflect what's going on in that field. They put the microphone in the guy's face. I haven't heard the Falcons, except Vic Beasley when he came to Jesus moment on camera, just said the I thing, and I said more of them should say I thing. I did this wrong. We did this as a team, no more as team. More of as me, I jacked this up.
Right.
And Dan Quinn, no more brotherhood. The brotherhood need to call each other out and say, hey, you're messing up. Let's get this better. That's it.
Well, I told you I was going to make you mad. This is the thing that I think might make you mad, because if you go back and look at last week, the big news was the trade deadline. For the most part, trade deadline was quiet around the National Football League, right? There was all these rumors about big trades, and people like me love to fan the flames of, this trade's going to happen, that trade's going to happen, and a lot of times this stuff never comes to pass. But with Atlanta in particular, Vic Beasley, that was not a guy I expected Atlanta to be able to trade, because we'd already heard some reports it was a weak market for a guy like Beasley. Falcons may have had to pay part of his salary had they traded him anyway. But, Bob, I do think there's something to be said for sending a message about what's acceptable and what's not. Beasley's level of play for me has been so low that the moment that you couldn't trade him on the trade deadline, I think it would have been important for Atlanta to send the message to say, you got to go. And listen, I don't joyously take anyone's job from them.
You just did.
Well, but I'm saying I don't take pleasure in saying this guy's got to go and that guy's got to go. I respect that these are paychecks that feed families. I respect all of that. But there's also going to be a level of a standard accepted level for the performance of the organization. Beasley's below that. I believe his effort is below what's needed here. From that standpoint, if you can't trade him, and I didn't expect them to be able to, then I believe cutting him in particular is the appropriate step. Send a message that you were wrong for re-signing him. Send a message that this level of play is unacceptable. Send a message to the rest of the guys that the eye in the sky doesn't lie and it's looking down on you. If they couldn't trade Vic Beasley, I believe they should have cut him last week.
Well, to me, that puts the move and the X on Thomas Dimitrov's head. Because then it's like, it was more than just Vic Beasley. If we say what we expected from performance to what they gave us, it's Vic Beasley and Devontae Freeman. And there was trade rumors about Devontae Freeman, couldn't move him either.
Right.
And it's one of those things is that whether you cut him, you bench him, you scold him, reprimand him on the sideline, that man has to look in the mirror and handle that. So if he was cut from the Falcons, he would still have to look in the mirror for the next team that pick him up off of waivers to decide, how am I going to perform?
You mentioned Devontae Freeman. I think it's really interesting. I'm going to show you this on the screen for a second. Everybody look at this. This comes from Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. And if you believe this, boy, this really raises some questions. What Rapp reports on Twitter, an intriguing would-be trade that was heavily discussed over the past week but didn't end up happening. Devontae Freeman to the Lions. Detroit inquired, Rappaport says. Sides talked about a possible deal at length. Listen to this. But ultimately, Atlanta just decided they didn't want to trade him. I hope that's not true. I hope this is an example of Ian Rappaport, who I believe is probably a good reporter. I hope this is an example of him just kind of maybe exaggerating a conversation into an outright trade agreement.
Just when I thought they were going to put you at GM for your hard measures of cutting the player Vic Beasley because he underperformed, now you wouldn't give the same dastardly deed to Devontae Freeman?
No, listen to what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is, I hope it isn't true that Atlanta had a chance to trade him and didn't.
Oh, you wanted him to go.
Yeah, because one way or another, they can't afford Devontae Freeman. This is like buying a boat, right? Like, some people buy a boat and they got $25,000 worth of credit card bills. You can't afford the boat. You need to sell the boat. Devontae Freeman's the Falcons' boat. They spent a bunch of money on him that they cannot afford. So if they had a chance to trade him, get something for him now, when good and well they're probably going to have to cut him at the end of this season anyway, that to me would be a demoralizing situation, potentially showing that the Atlanta brass just doesn't get it. You've got money invested in Devontae Freeman that he's not worth. You got money invested in Vic Beasley that he's not returning that investment on. So, yeah, I mean, I would treat Freeman as harshly as I would treat Beasley if I was the guy in charge. But in this case, a respected reporter is saying, you could have gotten something from him and you chose not to do it. I'm saying on behalf of the Falcons, I hope that's not true, because if it is true, that does not speak well of the Atlanta organization.
Good karma. That's what they got. Good karma.
Yeah. That's
what they got with Devontae was good karma.
Yeah.
It was basically like the same good karma they gave up Sanu for. Hey, Sanu, we like you, but we can trade you. Let's move you along. This is for you.
Second round pick, what they got for Sanu, that's a good deal. That's a starter, right?
Yeah,
that's a starter to the level, hopefully.
And you gave Sanu a happy sending. All right, you were the competitor.
Yeah,
so
he may win a Super Bowl.
I think Devontae Freeman's the same category.
Yeah.
Good karma. He had good karma with the team until that contract holdout. He was one of the guys that was just a hard-working guy that worked hard in practice, worked hard in the games, and then the money situation got in the way, and then, he lost a little, affection with that contract
Right.
deal, a little affection, and then you get hurt, again. So fans were kind of like, hey, we could have been through with Devontae
Sure.
a while back. But I was one of those guys that, under the current offense that he
Yeah.
rose to the stardom, Shanahan's offense, when his daddy ran it, didn't invest in running backs.
Right.
They had 3, and they worked all 3.
Yeah.
And they were all able to produce in that scheme. So they had late to middle round draft picks at running back, even undrafted guys succeed in that scheme. This was the holdover. Hey, I like Devontae Freeman, but you're showing up to be the tough GM they might need.
By the way, Brian Rogers on Facebook not happy with the situation with Devontae Freeman right now. Ren Estes also mentioning, talking about Kyle Shanahan's offense, to see Tevin Coleman, the other, what former Falcon running
You
back,
called him a cast-off.
having success up there. I mean, that's hard. I mean, for a lot of, Ren speaks for a lot of Falcons fans. Seeing Coleman working out well in a group of running backs there in San Francisco, they obviously use the fullback a lot there too. But seeing Coleman up there, for a lot of Falcons fans, it's hard to watch.
It is hard to watch, but one of the things that are also hard to watch is young Jimmy G with that offense and with that coordinator. I mean, head coach as coordinator. He's head coach and coordinator in my mind. Have success, and Jimmy G is what I say. Yeah, he's the young man's version of Matt Ryan. You know, Matt Ryan need to grow a beard. He might be just as good looking as Jimmy G, but he's the young man's version. And now this is like what happens when good coordinator, good coach, good cohesion, excellent office, good variables that work well, and finding stardom in players like a Kittle, young receiver that's balling out there.
Oh, yeah.
It's something to marvel at, but I said, are the Falcons done with that? They still have that with this team, with young Ridley and Austin Hooper.
Stefan Schelling on YouTube not happy with the Devontae Freeman contract. Certainly understand a lot of that. By the way, it's AJC Falcons News Now. It's sponsored by Miller Lite. This is Bob Whitfield, and today for Chuck Smith, my name's Brandon Adams. We just had a great report from D. Orlando Ledbetter on Raheem Morris moving to the offense. From offensive to defensive side of the football to finish off this season. For more in-depth coverage of the Falcons like that, make sure you become an AJC subscriber. And when you do, as a special thank you, you get this Falcons branded cooler. The AJC, a proud partner of the Atlanta Falcons, and your Falcons cooler can be your special thank you gift when you go to the website right there on your screen. Subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now. That's subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now. A lot of different choices. You can get the e-paper delivered to your device every day, Sunday home delivery, 7-day print, plus the e-paper. It's all there for you, and the Falcons cooler is yours as a special thank you. But you've got to use the website, subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now. Okay, before we wrap up here on our program, let's take a quick look around the rest of the NFL this past weekend. No Falcons games. Some of you settled in and watched some of the other games. Let's check in on some of that right now. I told this to Chuck the other day. With what Deshaun Watson, what Houston's got going on right now, this is, to me, is quickly becoming a very interesting team to watch. I believe the Texans are probably the class in the AFC South right now, and Buffalo keeps winning as well.
Yeah, Buffalo's looking real nice. I like Houston, but J.J. Watt is gone, so they're going to rely on other players in that defense to make some action happen.
How about Matt Moore stepping in for an injured Patrick Mahomes, and for a Kansas City team? Andy Reid's offense, man, you don't have to have the MVP quarterback. You can have a backup that was, out of the league. Reid's doesn't have a great playoff record, but when it comes to running off during the regular season, getting a win against Minnesota, it's a big-time performance there from the Chiefs.
Big-time performance, and the defense for Kansas City made some stops when they had to. But you got your favorite long-term, long-range target Hill back from injury, so that just really helped Matt quarterback there.
Also for the Falcons right now, if you want to start thinking about a race for the number 1 pick or top 3 pick, whatever, it looks like you got some help because Miami moves from the ranks of the winless teams. They beat the Jets yesterday, 26-18. So weird that the Jets were 6.5-point favorite in this game. That never made a lot of sense to me. But here's the thing that you got to be careful with. By Miami winning this game, not only do they go from the winless ranks, but now the 1-win teams get a lot more crowded.
Oh, yeah.
Right now you got Washington there, you got the Jets down there in that 1-win situation. Obviously Miami, Atlanta, Cincinnati. In a lot of ways, Miami beating the Jets doesn't help the Falcons' draft positioning as much as you might think.
Can we at least get to December before we take the we got to lose the rest of the games mentality? It's too soon to be thinking about the draft status by losing.
Fair enough.
Draft status by winning meaning that you work hard, you still don't win. We understand.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But you forget about San Diego
That's right. Yeah.
and that Green Bay game.
Yeah, that's exactly
And
right.
they exposed the Aaron Rodgers new coach combination as, hey, y'all didn't put up the numbers that y'all thought y'all could. And Chargers, who fired,
Right.
who was it? Malarkey was the
Yeah.
offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Now you coming back in with a young play caller that seems to connected with his quarterback, an aging quarterback.
I think that's right. Chicago's a disaster right now. I believe.
Oh,
the
quarterback.
Mitchell
Ooh, horrible.
Trubisky era is probably over there. Jacoby Brissett goes down for the Colts. That changes the calculus of the AFC South a pretty good bit. You mentioned the Chargers. Oakland Chargers on Thursday. That's actually a pretty good Thursday
That's
night
gonna
game.
be a good game.
Yeah, coming up pretty well here. A pretty good game here. And how about the Ravens last night on Sunday Night Football? Lamar Jackson continues to be one of the thrilling players in this league. Greg Roman, though, I believe I have the stat correct. Third different time that Roman, as offensive coordinator, has gone up against Bill Belichick's defense and come away with a win. Third different team he's done that with. So Baltimore is one of those teams that has sneakily over the years kind of had the Patriots number. Maybe you can say the same thing about Roman there as well. I think New England's fine. I'm not going to make a big deal about the loss. But Baltimore potentially asserting itself in the AFC. It's a really good win for the Ravens.
Very good win and very good display of their arsenal with the quarterback and the things that he
Yeah.
can do, and with Greg Roman calling exotic plays for the quarterback and the motioning and the movement of guys and running that little option pistol scheme that he
Right.
runs. It was one of the things that put other teams on notice. It put the Patriots on notice.
By the
Right.
way, yeah, that's exactly right. By the way, Cowboys Giants tonight. Remember, the
Yes!
Cowboys already have a bad loss this season. They've already lost the Jets. So for the Jason Garrett observers and you know how happy Dallas is with him, watch how they play tonight against a bad team. That's going to go a long way towards that. Thanks for being here as part of AJC Falcons News Now, presented by Miller Lite today. Don't forget to check out Miller Lite, the official beer of the Atlanta Falcons. It tastes great. It's just 96 calories. And Bob, great job today. I love your perspective on the Falcons. Obviously, you had a great career, and it's given you a lot of expertise. Thanks for sharing that with us on the show here today.
Thank you, sir. GM and assistant GM.
Thanks for being with us here. We'll be back on Friday, 1 p.m., getting ready for Falcons Saints. Chuck Smith will be here for it. Glad to have all of you with us as well on both Facebook and YouTube. We'll see you next time on AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite.